an unprecedented task force in Jamaica's history because it included 7 ministers of government and key leaders from Jamaica's 3 of the social partners, the private sector, and Richard Pandoy, who is here with us today, was on that task force in his capacity as president of the Jamaica Exporters, Manufacturers and Exporters Association. So were other private sector leaders, so were trade union leaders, Anthony Chang's successor at the Chamber of Commerce, Lloyd Distant, was there representing the chamber. And there were also civil society leaders. And the spirit of that task force is that we have to work together as a country because the challenges are so severe. We need all hands on deck. And that's why I say that this forum today follows that spirit, because what we have here are a series of business leaders and a wonderful legal mind to help us understand how we can deal with the challenges and how these individuals in their various capacities have been dealing with the challenges confronted by this tremendously challenging pandemic in COVID-19. So that's one element of context. But the other element of context relates to where Elder Thomas and our host started to take us, which is to recognize that this forum is a product, indeed a project, of ASI. And ASI is seamlessly linked to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, not just here in Jamaica, but it's a worldwide organization. And there are 2 principles of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that are going to be important as we get into our discussion today. The first principle is that Seventh-day Adventists believe very, very strongly that we are to be stewards, and we are to be effective stewards. And this is a task that God has placed on all of us throughout the world, to be stewards of our families, to be stewards of our companies, our institutions, our countries, and indeed of this world called Earth. So we feel very, very strongly about the importance of stewardship. The other principle is that we believe also very, very strongly that God made humankind in his image. And the question is, and his likeness. And the question is, what does that mean? and Elder Thomas knows where I'm going here because we have this discussion a lot. All human beings are made in the image of God, irrespective of their gender, both genders, every ethnicity, every race, every nationality. And so if you think of it from that perspective, you realize immediately that the focus on image is not really on issues of physical nature. And this is made even more clear when in the same text that we're told that God made humankind in his image, we're told that he gave them dominion over all the living creatures of the world. And if you think about it, what allows us to have dominion over all living creatures? It's not because of how fast we run, or how strong we are, or how tall we are, because humans don't feature in any of those categories relative to other living creatures. What is the distinctive feature of humankind that we don't see in other living creatures? It is, of course, our ability to reason, our ability to think, our ability to innovate. That is essential to what is meant by humans being made in the image of God. And these are the 2 principles that I would really want to ask our panelists to focus on. The first being, how have they, during the course of this pandemic, which has been going on for over a year now, we had our first case in Jamaica on the 10th of March, 2020, how have they stewarded their organizations over the last year? What have been some of the ways in which they have been able to manage through this crisis, either in their own organizations or in entities of which they're aware, or organizations for which they have leadership responsibility. So that's the first set of questions that we're going to want our panelists to address. But the second, and maybe just if not even more importantly, is how are they using this crisis to create opportunities for their businesses and for this country that go beyond the crisis? How are they reasoning? How are they innovating? How are they using these God-given intellectual gifts that humankind has been uniquely provided with to figure out how to make their organizations better? So those are the two streams of discussion that we're going to have today. We're also going to have an opportunity for those of you who are in our virtual audience to send in questions, and we really are happy for all of you who have joined in this session. We think we should really have a very interesting set of discussions, especially if you send us questions which we can address. And so with that said, I want to introduce this very distinguished panel. And when Elder Thomas shared with me the panel, I was really quite excited because these are, you know, the best individuals that you could have on this subject, and that's always quite a pleasure. So we have Anthony Chang, who is sitting next to me. Anthony is a past president of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. He is the CEO of Consolidated Bakeries, and he serves on many other boards, and both now and in the past, and has an excellent understanding of the Jamaican business climate. So Anthony, it's really good to be on the panel with you. I already mentioned Richard Pandui, who is the president of the Jamaican Manufacturers and Exporters Association. This is a really important organization in Jamaica. If you think about it, and you think about you know, Jamaica's prospects for development, I don't think you'll get much of an argument suggesting that exporting is key to Jamaica's future. And the reason the manufacturers and the exporters came together is they realized that there's tremendous potential synergy between the manufacturing sector and the export sector. So Richard, it's great to have you because I know you have been looking at this issue very, very carefully. The private sector has been, again, rolling up its sleeves and working very effectively with the government on the COVID-19 crisis management, including you know, sourcing vaccinations, sourcing vaccines, including thinking through the challenges that confronted those who served on that economic recovery task force. And so Richard, is great to have you. And Richard also has a very important other seat, which he's the CEO of one of Jamaica's most dynamic companies that has incidentally done very, very well, I think, through the crisis, because Separate has had quite a good year. And so it's really good to have Richard on board. Tavia Dunn, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Tavia is a partner with Eunice Schofield, and she also, I believe, is involved in ASI East Jamaica chapter. And so you come here wearing two hats, and Tavia is really going to be able to help us bring a legal perspective on some really important issues that are confronting employers and employees and the society at large in the context of this crisis. Next to Tavia is Christopher Williams. Chris Williams is one of Jamaica's most innovative financial minds. And it really is a pleasure to have Chris with us. Chris has served as the Vice President of the Jamaica Securities Dealers Association and had a very significant impact within that organization. He currently is the founder and the CEO, one of the founders and the CEO of Proven, a company that started from scratch, but not really from scratch, because it had such a foundation that it decided its name would be Proven. Chris also served with distinction as the CEO of NCB Capital Markets before he moved to launch Proven. So I know that, that with Chris, we have an opportunity to really interrogate one of the fine minds coming out of the Jamaican financial sector. And then we have Hugh Johnson. Hugh Johnson is known to many people because in his service as president of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, he has been very, very strident about the importance of small business in Jamaica. And in this process, he has not really needed to convince people, because right around the world, it is well understood that if you don't get your small business sector of your country working well, it's very, very difficult to grow and advance. And this is a message that Hugh Johnson has repeatedly pointed to. And he's also been involved in thinking through the challenges of this crisis. I note you that CVM has had a running program on the crisis, and every time I see the commercial, you're featured there as one of the individuals who has been presenting in that series from CVM. Hugh also runs his own small business company, Johnson & Sons Organic Fertilizer, and so he has the agricultural perspective, which again is very, very important in the context of a country like Jamaica, where we all recognize that we have a long tradition in agriculture and we have many individuals who are employed in that sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, I think you now understand why I said that I'm excited to be a part of this panel, because we really do have an extraordinary collection of intellectual talent and business and legal experience to which we can, seek to better understand how we roll up our sleeves as a country, not wring our hands, tired of that, roll up our sleeves, get to work, and help to take Jamaica out of this crisis and to break out of the walls in the process and build back Jamaica better, advance with progress. We're going to do all of those things. So we're going to turn right over to our panelists. As I indicated, we're going to ask them in two different segments to focus, first of all, on how they have stewarded their organizations, or how they have seen other organizations being effectively stewarded throughout the last year when we confronted this fundamental challenge. And so, without any further ado, I turn over to Anthony Chan.
First of all, thank you, Professor Winter. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here at the East Jamaica Conference among Seventh-day Adventists. It's a real pleasure, distinct pleasure. So, a nice question, Prof. I think it's important. I saw a lot of opportunities in a crisis. So what I've been learned over the last year, I spent a lot of time trying to improve businesses. But one thing last year really tested leadership. So first, you have to recognize it's a real crisis. Don't deny it. Those individuals were complaining about the situation. I think a lot of them had problems. So don't recognize it's an issue, but don't focus on the problem too much. Try to stay calm. One of the things we did is stay calm. And another thing which I think is important in a crisis like the COVID is your HR element, your human resource element. A lot of companies have staff that are going through a lot of crises, a lot of challenges. So the point is stay close to your staff. Staying close to staff really made a big difference. Communicate to your staff. And the third and most important thing, and I'm going to end with this, and especially since I'm at this forum, is to say the following. Prayer and meditation really helped. What we did in one of the organization, we created a prayer circle. We created prayer captains. So every week, whether it's on Zoom or Teams or any other online platform, prayer really helped, kept the company calm, and we stayed focused, and we came through the crisis. And that has helped us a lot. So that's my remedy, Prof.
Okay, thanks very much. Richard, just go straight to you.
Thanks, Prof, and thanks for having the Adventist Church for having me on this forum. I first want to give shout out to two churches that are very important to me, the Gregory Park Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Meadowvale Seventh-day Adventist Church, foundation church in my development. Talking about, breaking out the walls, I mean, for this purpose, I'm defining a wall as being a restrictive barrier. All right, so it's a restrictive barrier, and it's going to be an interesting topic. This past year has been a once-in-a-100-years pandemic, and we all know about it. We all know what crisis it brought. And for me, first of all, I mean, I'm wearing two hats here. First, the separate hat is a relatively large organization within Jamaica. And then, as president of the JMA, 74% of the membership are small and medium enterprises. I think those are the enterprises that most Jamaicans can relate to. But speaking in my capacity as separate, I think when the pandemic started, the first thing we did was look at the Jamaican public. And I mean, we took our leadership position and going to the public and saying to them, listen, just be calm. We're going to get through this. I think we went out there very quickly talking about supply chain because many Jamaicans are watching our television set and seeing people in Australia were panic buying. And we came out very quickly and said, just be calm. I mean, this is a crisis where it's not about individuals, companies, etc. It becomes now a national response that we needed. And so that became very important, that we took our position as stewardship to not only be for our company, but for our country. I mean, so that became a big driver for how we have operated through this pandemic so far, and it's still here, it hasn't gone anywhere. We also look at the business and say, what is it going to take to be successful? There are so many unknowns. You just didn't know what the next step was going to be. But what you have to do is approach it with confidence and with the clarity of purpose that you're going to make the best decision that faces you at this point in time. We look at fundamental things like, cash flow management. How could we incorporate technology to drive productivity? Important things to get the company to another level. What the crisis has done is kind of expose Jamaica to the fact that we were behind in many parts of where we needed to be in terms of how we're going to be competitive in the world environment. We have and had productivity issue. We have there's an innovation issue. We weren't innovating enough. We weren't looking at the export market enough. The crisis has created an opportunity where we're sitting here talking to thousands of people. We're talking to Adventists, not just in Jamaica, but all over the world. We suddenly can have church service, not because you physically have to go to church. You can stay in your home and now have church service become. You can have your spiritual life. So now the markets, there's borderless. I mean, Alfred Thomas, one of my favorite persons, exported the first set of bleach from Jamaica outside. I mean, big up, I mean, these are some of the real wins that were happening. So the crisis forced us to operate in another level. And that, to me, is an opportunity that we have to take and we have to continue to take. So I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight, Prof. But, at the end of it, for me, it's really about making sure we have a passion for people. We are here to bring service to each other and to make life better for all of us. So it's not just about the employees, about Jamaica, it's about a wider community. And that's how that's how we have dealt with the crisis.
So what I hear Anthony and yourself saying, Anthony is saying, make sure that you focus, but you also give yourself an opportunity to reflect and to meditate and to stay calm. And Richard, you're saying this really helps us to understand the most important assets in an organization, and you need to focus on your people.
And be aggressive.
Okay, and be aggressive. So on that issue of focusing on people, I want to bring in Tavia, because the crisis obviously has created tremendous employment challenges. Jamaica was doing reasonably well pre-COVID-19 in terms of bringing down its unemployment levels, increasing levels of employment. But in 3 or 4 weeks after we had the first case and we went into lockdown, we lost as many jobs in Jamaica as we had been able to increase during the preceding 4 years. Over 100,000 jobs were lost almost instantaneously with the curfew restrictions that were designed to help to manage the health crisis. So Tavia, what I want you to do is to take us through a little bit some of the employment-related challenges that firms have been encountering as they try to maneuver between, layoffs and redundancies and business closures, while at the same time trying to figure out how to keep their really important assets, if not within the organization, but close at hand, and so that there can be a relatively seamless process of bringing them back as the lockdowns ease and business activity can resume. It's been a very challenging process, and there are many legal entanglements that both employees and employees should really try to ensure that they don't get tangled up with. So, Tavia, over to you. If you could help us through some of those issues.
Firstly, I want to express gratitude for the opportunity to participate in this August panel. Insofar as the challenges that were faced for employers, one of the things we encouraged our clients to do, and we encourage all employers to continue doing, is the process of consultation. Certainly, as we meander through what are these uncertain times, nothing that has ever been contemplated, nothing that we can identify in history insofar as the impact on employment. I think Mr. Chang highlighted the whole process of just the consultation. I think once we were able, or once entities are able to indicate to their employees that these are the challenges that you have, certainly on the granular level, on their level, they're able to relate to the challenges. If we can express it insofar as how it translates into the organization itself. And I think that was one of the most important things that employers had to do. I won't say that it was all an easy road, certainly not, because then you have the issues of how do you keep your organization afloat when it is that you're being told your persons with comorbidities, persons who are over a certain age, having them be at home. How does that translate into your organization? And certainly our legislation does, Jamaican laws, does have in place the concept of layoffs, which we saw a few entities employing. But I think overall though, the consultation is what was one of the most important things, and that's even a part of labor relations, and that's what's encouraged insofar as labor relations across the board. So.
Thank you very much, Tavia, and we're going to come back to you, obviously, as we get into more detail on this issue. Chris Williams, love to hear from you, Chris.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Elder Thomas, for inviting me. I endorse what Richard is saying, that you're one of my favorite people as well. So blessings. Redundancy. That's the key word that I think was applicable at proven in March 2020. When the crisis unfolded, and even before the crisis, from about January, once we saw that this thing was picking up steam, and it was going to be difficult for Jamaica to get by without it affecting us, we sought a theme, and the theme that we decided on was redundancy. And redundancy from the standpoint of making sure that we had backup for critical areas. So we wanted redundancy in HR. We wanted to ensure that individuals that were of a similar responsibility or a similar job description, those individuals were separated and did not come into contact with each other, and therefore we were able to ensure that we had backups for all critical roles. Redundancy in terms of our technology. One of the things that we were asked to do, and as I'm sure the same with Richard and Anthony and Hugh, is that in organizations you're asked to have your backup sites, outside of Jamaica. For the redundancy. But a lot of these sites that we had decided on were in countries that were now being locked down and were, in fact, at the time handling the pandemic worse than we were. So didn't have the broadband, didn't have the necessary laptop with sufficient space to accept and process the work that they needed to do. So we had to be doubling our infrastructure to ensure that we had sufficient redundancy for our team members to execute. And then, finally, and probably most importantly, we had to have redundancy in terms of cash, because initially in the crisis, we weren't sure how long the lockdowns were going to last. We weren't sure how that would have had an effect on our revenue lines. We weren't sure how long we were going to be able to maintain our operating infrastructure without revenue to support it. So you normally operate with $10 in cash. You know how to look to move that to $100 in cash and ensure that you had sufficient cash redundancy in order to carry you through the projected tenure of the pandemic. So that was a theme at that time, and you know, looking back at it now as I sat here and reflected, you know, I hear Anthony and I hear Richard say that their focus was calm. Boy, I never calm at all. I sat down and I was like, boy, I did a lot of running at that time. I like to run. And I remember running at, you know, because I have a little complex, so I could run inside my complex. And I started working out with my sons. And you know, I remember that time. I don't recall being relaxed, but next time I'll try.
But what's interesting there, Chris, is that there is actually a line though of parallel. You had a coping mechanism.
Yes.
So Anthony's coping mechanism was to meditate. Your coping mechanism was to run.
I work out with my sons, and it really, I must say that you really have to look towards these crises and look for the opportunities. And my relationship with my kids blossomed, you know, as a result of that.
Well, in our next round, we're actually going to spend some more time talking about those opportunities. We want to bring in Hugh Johnson, but we have Humble, and they are going to treat us with another song, recognizing that we do want to make sure that this program has some variety and some interactivity. So we're going to listen to Humble, and then we're going to come back and get Hugh Johnson to give us his perspective on the stewarding process.
If there were no God, there would be no music, there would be no dream to be dreaming of. What a dreadful thought of an empty future. If there were no God, there would be no life. But we know that God is with us, and we know His majesty reigning down, the King eternal. Yes, we know the victory. I have of his head. Through his blood he formed creatures and reached out and breathed his life into man. And in all of us there's a calling us for his blessings to show. The best part of it is the heart of it, is the good news we know. Every time the sun shows his face, was it the act of God causing you to turn him away? Is it an act of God that you're refusing to pray? Is it an act of God causing you to turn him away? Is it an act of God, what he is doing for me? It's hard to tell you how I feel. It's hard to tell you just how grateful I am. But I'm still gonna make it show. With every breath, gonna let you know. I am accepting, though I can't comprehend how I could be worth it all when I was bound, despised, and low. He arose again. He defeated sin, and he shed his blood for me. It was an act of God. Yes, it was. It is an act of God. All men will know.
Singing is such an important part of events like this, and we want to thank Humble. Let me echo what Kavian Stewart has said in the chat. Thank you, Humble. This song is so comforting, and others have indicated the song is beautiful. Lorna Henry, beautiful singing. To God be the glory. So thanks very much, Humble. I'd just like to indicate that we do have the chat open. We are interested in fielding your questions, and so if you have questions for our panelists, please include them in the chat, and we will have an opportunity in our third segment to have our panelists answer questions. Those of you who know me, we talk about this a lot, Elder Thomas. We have a Sabbath school session that is interactive, and we love it because that interactivity is really what makes for a far more interesting setting, and educators know that that's the basis upon which individuals learn most effectively. So we are very eager to respond to questions. But I'm going to, at this point, go to Hugh Johnson and get his perspective again on that first set of issues that we're looking at here, Hugh, which is how did you steward your company through this crisis, or are you aware of, especially given your vast experience with small businesses all across the country, how other small businesses were able to steward themselves through this really difficult time that we've experienced over the last year?
Thank you, Prof. Wynne. I won't be outdone by Richard, because I want to tell you, Prof, that this is home, even though I'm from Central Conference.
The family's at work.
Correct, correct. As it relates to the challenges and the opportunities that we encounter through this crisis, I would first want to give kudos to the government for their leadership in calming the waters, because it could be much worse. They did an excellent job in calling all those stakeholders to that round table to have discussion and to seek solutions. As it relates to small businesses though, it was challenging, and I can say that about 20 to 25% of the businesses that heed the call to, as it were, pivot, are doing better than they were before the crisis, even though a greater percentage are doing worse. So it's really your agility in one, as pointed out by panelists before, engage your employees, keep close to them, let them understand that you have their interests at heart, and that was the course of action we took. And I must say, thankfully, we were able to even do more and better business than before the crisis. Because one, not only am I in agricultural input like fertilizers and so forth, but also in actual farming. And a simple equation, monthly your fuel bill to travel all over to these farms were in excess of 100,000. And just getting some machines, some laptops, and some cameras that you can stay put and see what is happening on site, even instruct the persons who are there. Within 2-3 months, you would have wiped out that investment as it relates to your travel expense. So those simple equations, just to remain calm, think it through, and to do the correct thing. So even though the crisis is on, but there are glorious opportunities available to small businesses. If you can just be calm, think it through, strategize, and pivot, as we have always asked them to do. Many years ago, we have been asked to go virtual, use technology. We want to do it, but we weren't getting there. This has forced us there. And those who have gone there, pointedly, they would have seen the result. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ewan. We're going to get, in our next session, into more of a discussion of this issue of pivoting. I want to go back. One of the individuals in the chat, Michael Harvey, has said, "Powerful, Chris, redundancy. You're a true disruptor." And the redundancy point that Chris Williams was making, although it came immediately after Tavia's discussion about employment issues, he wasn't speaking about making employees redundant. What he was speaking about is the importance of backup systems along the entire value chain of your organization in a way that you often don't contemplate when you have tranquility and placidity and relative calm, because everything is working. And so you don't really feel the need for those backup systems. But what this crisis did was to demonstrate strikingly how important it was to have very backup capacity. So I think we've had some very useful thoughts from our panelists. I want to just pause a little bit on the point that Hugh Johnson just made in relation to the stewarding of the country. And I started off with that, talking about the Economic Recovery Task Force, which really was another example of how, in Jamaica's case, we have a quadripartite social partnership arrangement, how all the social partners could come together and interact in a way that recognized that we had to manage this process as a society. the former leader of the opposition, Peter Phillips, was fond of saying, the job of nation building is the job of the nation. And everybody needs to get involved. And obviously, if that's the case, the job of economic recovery is the job of the nation. But I want to pause at the point that he made in terms of the government's custody and also link it to an article that was published in one of today's dailies, where Professor Winston Davidson was involved in the study. And what he concluded was that there was an important bipartisan consensus in Jamaica in terms of managing this crisis, in addition to the interaction between the government and private sector leaders, trade union leaders, civil society. That has helped Jamaica to steward itself through this process. Yes, we've had problems. I mean, we've had 1,000 deaths, almost 1,000 deaths, close to 50,000 cases. But having said that, we have had reasonable success in balancing health lives and economic lives. I mean, sometimes we call it lives and livelihoods, but if you need to work every day to get food and you're told that you can't work, all of a sudden, that's not just livelihood, that's life. That is life. Because you're staring right down, at the possibility of not being able to feed yourself and your family, and that's life. And so the balancing process has been very important in Jamaica in terms of trying to coordinate the health-related restrictions, while at the same time trying to ensure that individuals have an opportunity to earn a living, even if not in as comprehensive a way as would have occurred prior to the crisis. So I think we've had some good insights, and I now want us to move to the next section. We're always told about the fact that the Chinese characters for crisis include both the concept of challenge and opportunity. And you just started us on the discussion of pivot, and there are many ways in which we can articulate this process of opportunity. One is to say that you're pivoting to the next series of opportunities. Another is you're thinking outside of the box. Although I often say, I hope that when I'm traveling down the street, I don't encounter motorists who are thinking too much outside the box, because that could be dangerous. But the other way of looking at this is you're breaking out of your walls of restriction. So what I'm going to ask our panelists to do for us is to tell us a little bit about their experience with this pivoting, with this thinking outside the box, with this breaking out of the walls, which is innovating, and how we can use that experience to try to build a future for our businesses, for our sectors, and for our country that is more resilient, more competitive, more inclusive, because, of course, one of the huge challenges that has been confronted in this crisis, we see it in the educational sector, we see it in other sectors, is that the inequality that pervades our society has become more dramatically manifest during the course of this crisis. So we want a future for our businesses in Jamaica that, again, is more resilient, more competitive, more inclusive, fairer, more sustainable, because they're the issues of our environmental challenges. So, Anthony, starting again with you, what are some of the ways in which you have seen businesses innovate, think about new ways of doing things in the context of this crisis?
Well, thank you, Prof, for that question. Just want to say, first of all, when we talk about innovation, and Richard mentioned it, innovation to me is not just product innovation, not just a new beverage or a new financial product or a new agricultural product. Innovation goes beyond that, in my mind. Looking at operational innovation, how you operate your organization, innovation how you even operate your balance sheet, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the businesses I was involved in, Prof, intimately involved in, the first quarter of the pandemic, first quarter of the calendar year last year, the institutionals that were hit hardest were on the North Coast, hotels. So we had a business very dependent on the hotels. So we lost revenues, or threatened revenues, almost 25-30% of revenues were threatened in one quarter. Now, end of the quarter, we didn't have a decline at 30%, but we had to pivot. And we had to innovate how we're going to find this revenue source. So again, what we did, we didn't come with new products. What we did, we changed how we marketed our products, how we sold our products. So we came with the same products, and we looked at people, the crisis they're going through, challenge they're going through. And again, it touched on a theme that Richard mentioned, looking at people, and the people are consumers. So we actually went overseas. There were a lot of Jamaicans overseas, are going through their own crisis, they're staying at home, but they also wanted to be comforted. Comfort food was very important for us. So actually, we got our exports up the first quarter by about 20 or 30% by going after the export market. No, we were hindered because we had a curtailment of shipment, etc. We would have taken it on. So it's really about moving fast, staying humble. And one thing that the crisis or the COVID brought out is that we have to be humble because, we think we have a very robust company. Our balance sheet is strong, our P&L is strong, we have a great strategy, our tactical approach is strong. But, hey, that thing really humbled you. We have to say, hey, we're not that strong. And I'm going to say this. I think Jamaica, companies that are on our people will come out stronger out of this.
Thank you so much. And I can see that you had some discussion with Ella Thomas about the group that should sing for us to make sure that Humble would represent the principle that you're articulating there. Richard?
Right. So what I saw in our membership of the Jamaica Manufacturing Exporters Association, that there are particular aspects that did well in the pandemic. For example, natural food, teas, etc. Anthony spoke about comfort food, but people are also looking for food to boost their immune system. And I remember there was a case of a Jamaican doctor in New York who got COVID, and his remedy was a mixture of all these things you used to have in Jamaica, the ginger and the turmeric, etc. So you find that companies that are in that space, their exports have gone off the mean. I believe that agri-processing in Jamaica is a pillar that has now become a stark reality, that if we're going to grow our economy in a particular way, this has to be an important pillar. I think the pandemic has highlighted that. Food security in a particular way is very important. That we also found that people pivoted, for example, in the sanitizing gel. Companies that, Jamaica became very much an independent manufacturer for our own requirement, to the point that we actually had more than enough to export. And we saw that in companies all around. So companies adjusted, looked for opportunities, the ones that did really well. I think the aspect of just people management, for a long time, Jamaicans believed that you had to see somebody in front of you. They have to come to work every day to do the job. We had no choice. They had to stay remotely and do the job. Suddenly, you had to have the confidence that the person you employ can execute the job without being at work. That's a paradigm shift. That has no change how we look at real estate. You probably don't have to have this whole room in offices. You can repurpose your real estate now to do something differently. The other big opportunity is export. For this country to advance, export has to become a key part of what we do. What's the point of having a depreciating currency every year if you're not using it to drive your export business? Suddenly, we had no borders. You can click, you can go online. E-commerce is now, look at e-commerce. Look at what we're doing now. These are the good things that have happened. We still have some bad things that have happened. I think the inequality has become worse. The divide between the have and the have-not have become worse during this period. But we see a blueprint now for opportunities. Now, I just want to say to our viewers that the crisis has not gone. It is evolving. It has gone into a different space. And Chris will going to have to tell us a little bit more about that, because now cash flow and cash flow requirements are a big deal. Supply chain disruption all over the world, as world economies recover at different pace, is creating a massive impact on our society. And the businesses out there have to look at it, because your cash flow requirement is now changed, because you have to spend a lot more to buy raw material and to put down. You don't know if you're going to get goods. So it is evolving. So, we sit here and I don't want us to think about the pandemic as something that has gone. It is evolving. However, there are many opportunities out there, and Jamaica is a small space. If we get a small dot of the global market, it's a big deal for us. And I think that is where we need to keep going. We need to punch above our weight class. We need the business sector need to operate like how the cultural and the creative sector has operated. We can be world influencers. Brand Jamaica is powerful. and we need to make it work for us.
Excellent, excellent. So I think we have a couple of themes there. One is technology, and the fact that technology is a leveler. And it's very interesting because you don't necessarily have to be creative with the technology. Once the technology is available and you use it effectively, all of a sudden it becomes a leveler. I found it so interesting. I mean, there was a quote in again, one of our dailies a few months ago that says something to the effect that, the devil has closed the doors of the church, and the Lord has opened a church in every home through technology. And we really have pivoted dramatically. Elder Thomas was talking about our Sabbath school. And I must say that many of us are finding that virtual discussion to have many benefits that we didn't experience in the physical discussion, because all of a sudden, instead of only having a half hour, we go on for 2 hours, and we can hear everybody, and we can interrogate, and it's very efficient. And so we are finding opportunities. But the point that you make, Richard, about seeing Jamaica in that leveling process as having access to the world, and taking advantage of our cultural attributes to move into that global space is very, very powerful. Tavia, we have an important issue for you to take up on, because as companies have been trying to manage this crisis, and as they have seen that technology has moved us forward, the God-given talent that we have as humankind has facilitated the development of a vaccine in record time. Record time. And that vaccine is helping to mitigate the risks of the virus. And some employers, because they are so concerned about the risks associated with contagion from the virus, are going beyond encouraging their employees to take the vaccine. They are bordering on either making it mandatory or being quite coercive in terms of this vaccine process. Help us out from a legal perspective here now. What are some of the challenges? Where should we be looking in terms of vaccination policy in our organizations?
Well, certainly the position has been a split one, because there is no concrete position presently in law. As it stands, the vaccine is not mandatory by the government, and that's where I think the first issue lies. Because while, yes, it's a public health crisis, it is not compulsory from a government standpoint, and I think that may have to be where the policy decision comes from first, before employers can be looking to mandate their employees to do so. Because the question is, one, are you now introducing a new element into your employment contract with your current employees? And then, because there's now that change in the employment contract, in terms of your current employees, is that something where you're now entering into a new contract? Is it a termination? And you then fall along that line, which then leads to the question of, should I be given notice pay, etc. So the issue has not been settled. Curiously, over the weekend, actually, out of Barbados, you had one attorney at law, senior practitioner, who was indicating that, yes, it is possible for employers to mandate employees to be vaccinated. But then the Minister of Health came out and said no. Or is it, I think it was the Minister of Labor, sorry, came out and said, no, you can't do that, because under the labor laws, which are somewhat similar to ours, it constitutes a change in the employment contract for your current employees. The situation, albeit, may be different for new employees, because you can say it as a condition for your employing them that they must be vaccinated. So the issue is not a settled one. I see there is ripe litigation coming out of it in relation to if employers, in fact, are mandating or coercing employees to do so. Because what you be saying to an employee practically is that if you fail to take it, then I'm terminating your employment. Is it a justifiable termination? Those are the kind of issues that's going to flow out of it in terms of your current employees.
Okay, thanks very much. And I think that distinction, Tavia, that you make is so important. the distinction between your current employees and whether you're changing conditions of work. And our labor relations is very, very clear that changing conditions of work is a negotiated process, not a unilateral process.
Indeed.
But at the same time, if you're talking about a situation where there's an agreement at the point of entry into the workforce, that's a different scenario. And I think very usefully you're making that distinction between current employees and the potential for new employees who, in the context of engaging in a workplace arrangement, have agreed that they will be vaccinated as a part of that condition of employment. So I think it's important that this process is one where employees are engaged in a consultative process and also taking guidance from lawyers and also from national policy.
Indeed, yes.
And I think you have mentioned both of those issues, and we would encourage all of those who are listening to think carefully about that, especially in the context of what we were saying earlier about the importance of engaging with your workforce, valuing your workforce, and therefore, as a consequence, recognizing that these have to be team efforts if they're likely to be successful. Chris, pivoting, innovating.
Boy, I just sitting down here. This has been a nice little, reminiscing opportunity to sit back and just remember the last year and a half. And so we went through the first 6 months, or first 3 or 4 months, with the theme of redundancy. So we we deal with the redundancy and everything. And then, of course, during that time, you take every single solitary natural vitamin that you can find, I mean, I used to all pick the plants, the grass, and eat the grass. You understand? Anything at all. You go online and a man send you a WhatsApp, say, boy, grass will stop COVID. Tomorrow morning, man, eat grass. So, the coming out of the first 3 months of redundancy, eventually you get tired of the lockdown and thing, and all of a sudden, I just got this, we just all at Proven just got this burst that, listen, we're going to go down fighting. So, aggression became our new theme. That was our theme going, from about July, August. Maybe because 2 of our co-founders is also members of the PNP, and it was election time. Maybe that's why they were so aggressive at that time as well. But we just felt that there was an opportunity. And so and I want, Jamaica to not use the word pivot as much as I want to use the word reinvent. I think that this pandemic has given us a glorious opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to go up against world beaters. Richard hinted at this in his discussion, and I want to emphasize it. We idolize so much our sporting heroes. We idolize, Shellyan, world leading time. We idolize Usain. We idolize Leon Bailey. All of our local, and those guys focus on beating the world. So all of a sudden, while I'm sitting down eating the grass, I'm like, yo, you know what? We really need to get up and just recognize that we can take on the biggest bank in Germany, or we can take on the biggest real estate development firm in Hong Kong or in New York. And so we want to be as globally competitive as our athletes. That's what we want to start to focus on. And when we started to look at that, we recognize just how small the world really is, because the people that were responding to our online sessions, of course, all of us started to do these online sessions and webinars and so on. And the people that are sending in the questions are coming from North Dakota or New Orleans or Holland. And I'm like, what? I mean, these are, and maybe they're Jamaicans or Jamaican hints of whatever, but the reality is that our brand is global, our reach is global, and therefore our products must be global. So we just became aggressive and said, listen, we're going after businesses, right? We want to lock down the Caribbean. And so we bought 3 businesses. We bought 2 banks and and a feed mill. I remember talking to Pandui about a feed mill. I was like, the first question I said to Richard, by the way, what is feed exactly? I didn't even know what animal feed was, but we were so aggressive. We were just like, listen, this is the time for us to go out there, and anything that we saw that we felt we could get a deal on, we were going after it and we're going to pick it up. We started 7 real estate developments, and every single apartment that we put on the market was sold in that time period. We tripled our marketing spend because everybody was online. So we said, listen, we're going to advertise we're going to make them tired. We even sponsored the electoral debates. We even sponsored the electoral debates, with NCB and Scotia and all the big boys. We were like right there up with them. And so we tripled our marketing spend. And the reality of that is the result, of that is an explosion in our top line, in terms of investors coming into our various institutions, in terms of the product demand, in terms of brand recognition for Proven, in terms of, as I said, the sale of our real estate. So and the real estate sales, we started to do a lot of the advertising to the diaspora. And 50% of the real estate sales was from the diaspora. People were sending us the Biden checks, the stimulus checks. They were literally sending us the physical checks. They weren't even lodging them. And so I am saying to those on the thing that, listen, we have to change. We have to change now. We have to be globally competitive. When Usain and when Shellyan is in training right here in Jamaica, they're not thinking about beating the girl that's right beside them in the training. They're thinking about beating this girl in London, or this other girl in Holland, or this other one in the United States. That's where we have, as business people, now have to elevate to. We have to recognize that our products can and must compete in the global space, and we will be successful because we're Jamaicans.
I think that's very, 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 very powerful. And there are 2 elements to it. One is that we have to have vision and we have to think big. We have to think global. And I see heads nodding. Elder Thomas, Cecil Foster from Foster Ridge, because they're thinking in those terms, and others on our panel. But you have to be disciplined in the process.
You have it is a general sense of aggression. Because when you talk to Shellyan and so on, her mindset is so aggressive. Right. She is determined to win, and she is determined to beat whoever around the globe that is running 100 meters for women at the Olympics. And that kind of aggression we need to learn from, and we need to absorb. And so my theme, as I said, because I like to be driven by a theme. So my theme is aggression. Aggression in your training, aggression in your product development, aggression in your branding, aggression in your online marketing, aggression in your staffing. Ensuring you're picking the right people, and you're making sure that they themselves see themselves as globally competitive. And aggression in your capital structure as well, talk to Proven, but aggression in your capital structure as well, that is critical. But that's just general. The theme right now, I'm not using pivot, I'm saying Jamaica, let's change. Let's get aggressive, and let's follow Shelley.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. I'll give you an anecdote which I think you might appreciate. So Patrick Hilton, as many of us know, is married to a former athlete, Bridget Foster Hilton. And when he was being awarded a prize some time ago, he, in his speech, said he wants to thank his wife for teaching him what it means to be world class. Yeah. And that's exactly the point that you make. Yeah. We have models from our athletes that are sitting right next to us, or not necessarily as close as Patrick and Bridget, but close enough, right? And we can learn from them in terms of what it means to be world class. And Chris, that's the point that you're making. A very, very powerful point. Hugh, I want to go to you. And I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about how your company has innovated, how you've seen other companies innovating. But I also want to ask you to respond to one of the questions that we have from the chat. And it's from Michael Harvey. And his question is, what can the Jamaican government do to encourage more involvement in farming? We've heard so much about the importance of agriculture in this process. It's come front and center to us, especially when you saw some of the panic buying and people began to wonder what would happen to global supply chains. And everybody was saying, you know, we need to think more about agriculture, but we have to think about it technologically. So I'd ask you to answer on two fronts. What have you seen companies do in terms of innovating, and how would you respond to Michael Harvey's question?
Thank you, Prof. In following up on those questions and even Chris' suggestion as it relates to aggression, I must share with you that I've gone utilizing social media, not just advertising to the region, but to the world. And to my surprise, 2 companies out of Africa asked for quotation and samples. It was sent to them, and the order, subsequent order, is more than what I've been doing annually. So those are the level of changes and aggression that is needed. The question that you asked about government, what can government do? Government must pivot first. The economy was structured on a regulatory framework from the colonial masters. We need to transform that to a productive framework. The regulatory framework is not conducive to business environment, it's not business friendly. So that is one of the first pivoting that must take place. The other step is for the aggression or the urgency to be in each and every one of us, because as we all know, each of us is just a microcosm of the whole. So in order for the country to move forward, each of us must move forward with that mindset and that aggression. Because I've been associated with the African diaspora for some time, and every country in Africa, if they know that you're a Jamaican, they want to worship you. That is 1.3 billion people. Untapped market. Untapped, even they want to come here. 2 years ago, a few months before the pandemic, I was in Ghana, and I got a courtesy call to the Ashanti king, which is the second largest kingdom in Africa. And when I met the gentleman, his first word to me was, ever since from I'm a boy, I've always wanted to visit Jamaica. So because of the aggression of our forefathers like Marcus Garvey and this Pan-Africanist movement, they see Jamaica as a place that everybody wants to understand more about, want to know about. Can you imagine if we should get 0.01% of that market, tourism market, to come to Jamaica annually? It would transform the economy in such a way, it would be magnificent. The question that was asked, can you remind me of it, Prof?
The farming question.
Okay.
Yes, what can the government do to help? And you were saying the government has to pivot first and move away from a regulatory structure in terms of the farming sector.
Correct. And as I've said before, it will go back to the colonial tradition. We were trained to just be primary producers. We must go to value added. Why should I walk into a supermarket and pick up a bottle of cranberry juice to drink when no cranberry is planted in Jamaica, and I can't pick up a delicious, refreshing, nutritious bottle of passion fruit juice? Those are the things that need to happen from the farmer's perspective, to see themselves going further in the value chain to get a greater revenue, percentage of the revenue from the value chain. And that is where we all need to go and to focus and stop being primary producer.
So innovation at the value chain level. Colleagues, unfortunately, we're going to have to start winding down now because we're almost out of time. There are some powerful questions, though, that are in the chat. And I want to give our panelists an opportunity for any closing thoughts, but in the process, also address at least two of these questions. So one question, I think this is a very important question from Omar Oliphant. We've talked about the issues of widening inequality, and his question is, what are some of the things that are being done or need to be done to improve corporate social responsibility at a time when inequality has widened? So I want us to place that question as a point of reference. And then the other question from Bless TV is, would any of you encourage small companies to merge in the context of this challenge of being a global competitor? And then the third question, any comments that anybody wants to make that we haven't already talked about in relation to our future? You know, what would be the most significant driving forces to create a future of prosperity and progress for our companies and for Jamaica? So anyone can answer any of those three questions. Chris, I see you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I wanna start. I can answer. Don't answer all three. Just answer one. Okay. I'll start with the last one then, which is the future. I would like to say that I'd like to see two things. One is continued hesitation and, in fact, resistance towards using deficit financing to drive the growth objective. I feel that the fiscal discipline that we've seen from central government over the last 8 years has been a major change agent in Jamaica, and has resulted in a much stronger and more vibrant private sector. And we want to see that continue. So I'd ask the finance minister to continue to be disciplined and hold the reins and not drive up the debt to GDP in an effort to drive growth. The private sector will respond, but keep the macroeconomic fundamentals stable. Exchange rate, monetary policy, etc. That to me, I'd like to see. That's number one. That's job one.
And Chris, that is so powerful because in your business, the low interest rate environment has been extraordinarily helpful, and it's a consequence of the fiscal discipline.
It is a
consequence. I think the other point as it relates to the pandemic is that the care package the Jamaican government was able to provide was a result of those years of fiscal sacrifice. And that was very powerful because it could have been more, many people would have wanted it to be more, but you know, I had colleagues abroad who said, they're amazed that Jamaica is doing this. Where did this come from? Because it was unusual. We had never had that kind of a care package.
So
before.
I don't want the pressure to do more and that push up the debt levels and put us back where we were coming from. So that's job one. The second now is capacity building. I feel that we need capacity building at 3 levels, at the startup level, and to speak to the small businesses. I would encourage you to participate as much as possible in the DBJ programs and the JAM Pro programs. Those programs are excellent and they help to build your capacity because the trajectory of your business comes down a lot to your capacity to drive the business, your understanding of finance, your understanding of capital, your understanding of marketing, your understanding of IT. And those capacity building initiatives are being driven by DBJ, and I'd like to see more, and I'd like us to participate in them. That's why Separate is the top, because they have top capacity. They have the top, the brightest, and the best.
Right, Richard?
You understand? Except for Richard. And they have the brightest and the best, and Richard. But seriously, if you're going big globally, when you take a look at our coaches and so on, and our physio, and they are the best. So and they're trained. So we need to put in the work and build our capacity, small business people. If you're not training yourself, you are not going to be able to beat the man in London. Put in the work, develop your capacity. At all levels, that's being done. So at the big company levels that's Separate, they're putting in training every day, and they're already the top. At NCB, etc., come down to the medium-sized companies, they're doing the same. Come down to the small businesses, you have to do the same. So my focus on the future is 2 things. From central government, hold the reins. From us as the private sector, put in more capacity building. Learn from the athletes. Shelley and Fraser Price, after she ran 10.63, when the stadium empty, she was there warming down, doing her stretches, going back through her start, understanding her training again, building her capacity. That's how she run 10.63, building her capacity. Let's keep building our capacity. Private sector, let us keep building our capacity.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. We really are down now, so I'm going to actually direct the questions that are...
I'd just like to follow up on that, though.
Yes.
It's in terms of my one point, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What I'd like to see for the future.
I actually have another point for you as well.
Yeah,
But go
I'd
ahead.
like to see a future that's better for all Jamaicans, not just for some Jamaicans. More than 50% of our people in our country are living day to day. And in fact, when the crisis happened, it exposed that in a big way. I think the capacity that Chris talked about has to come from the fact that people have to be given an opportunity to develop capacity. Capacity don't come because of a wish. You have to put the resources in place to allow persons to build the capacity. In this pandemic, our educational system has been decimated. Decimated. We're going to pay for this. And I think that I want us to focus that Jamaicans are not at the lower. We talk about value chain, we talk about products, but we talk about people, or most of our people are occupying the lowest part of the value chain. Our people are not earning enough to break out of their personal economic trajectory. And therefore, they can't invest in their family to beat the cycle that they're in. I'd like to see a Jamaica where more Jamaicans have opportunity to stay here and develop themselves and their family.
All right. We have maybe 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask questions. We really want to take questions from our audience. So, Hugh, I'm going to ask if you could respond to Bless TV's question about whether or not small companies should be merging. Anthony, the question about social responsibility, would you take that issue? Is there more that our companies can do in terms of social responsibility? And then there's a new question for you, Richard, in your capacity as head of the JMA. Is there any possibility for us to acquire, firms in Jamaica to acquire the intellectual property that would facilitate vaccine manufacturing activity in Jamaica? So very quickly, those 3 questions. Hugh, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Prof. As it relates to that question about merging, it's not a as straightforward as that to say you will merge or you shouldn't merge. It's really down to the individual. The multinational has been pushing for clustering and those type of things, but it has never worked from top down. You and I must have that synergy, see the need for both of us coming together to do better to cause that merge. If it's forced on us, it won't work, and it will never work. It has never worked. So as it relates to that question, it's a matter of the individuals, how you feel, and your opportunities that will multiply as it relates to merging or stay
From bottom up.
in individual.
From bottom up,
operation.
which is important from a
Correct.
bottom up perspective.
Correct.
Anthony,
Quickly,
CSR.
Yeah, I just want to mention something about merger acquisition. I
Yes.
think it's very important for businesses to look at that. And when you talk about acquisitions or getting it together, it's not just an equity swap. That can happen too, but bear in mind there's something called collaboration. And I think it's very important as you build out and as you grow and take on the world, you collaborate. If you have a product, you may want to work with me because I can export it. I'm doing that with other companies. You have a good export base in UK, I work with you. So collaboration work there is very, very key. Social responsibility, very important, Prof. And I want to say this. I'm probably all business people in Jamaica. If you don't have a heart, you can't be in business. So it's inherent in all of us. It is not the same game as years back when there are different persons running the country. So there's a big social responsibility. One of the key things to do, treat your staff well, pay them well, and do the best you can. And that's where it is.
And to be fair to the Jamaican private sector, I mean, if you think about the PSOJ, they went through a very significant effort at corporate social responsibility.
We're helping right
at
now. I mean, I'm part of that thing. We're helping with the vaccine rollout program.
Absolutely.
We're part of that, very intimately involved in that. In fact, I'm on that committee.
Okay.
And a lot of people in Jamaica do not realize that we're intimately involved in Blitz.
Okay, and of course, Howard from the private sector.
Exactly.
Can we do any, Octavia?
Well, Richard and I decided to do a swap.
Okay,
there.
excellent. Thanks.
So we decided to collaborate.
Yes.
Right. So insofar as the acquisition of intellectual properties, that is something that can be done. The question is it available to be done? Because in recent times, I believe the manufacturers of the vaccines have expressed the desire that they want to maintain their intellectual property rights to the vaccine. So insofar as whether or not the question is whether or not they're going to be willing to license individuals to be able to use the patent and develop the vaccine. And that would have to be a question for the manufacturers of the developers and manufacturers of the vaccine to decide on.
Thank you very much, Tavia. I thought we were at our time, but our coordinators give me a final question, and so I know that I have the opportunity to ask it because I've been given the instruction. And the question is, it's from Donovan Hansen. Can companies like Proven, Separate, Consolidated Bakeries, Fosrich, they didn't put Pioneer, but I'm adding Pioneer, Thomas, provide the space to take on some qualified Jamaican young people who are willing to provide sweat equity to them? So I don't know who wants to take that one.
Well, let me tell you, what we did in moving from the theme of redundancy to the theme of aggression is we bumped up our staffing significantly, right? Because, of course, you're being aggressive, you're putting in more marketing, you're expecting more growth. So as a result, we have been more aggressive in soliciting staffing. What is critical is that individuals must begin to recognize that to get into a proven, you're going to have a certain level of qualification. And that qualification requires significant study. So I get a lot of resumes, and I don't see the emphasis. Certainly not in the men. In the women, for sure, you're seeing more. But certainly not in the men. I'm not seeing the emphasis on capacity building in the education space. But yes, we are being more aggressive. We have been. We did that around about 6-7 months ago and beefed up our staffing. So I would say that, yes, we did that. We don't necessarily want to take advantage of you and not pay you. So we will pay. And we will take the sweat equity, but we will pay as well.
So your advice is that the sweating needs to start very early on during the educational
The
process.
capacity building.
Yes, the capacity building.
The aggression that I want to see is in the capacity building.
Okay.
But the
Thank you
point,
so
the
much.
point they raised asks about protecting and they name the companies, but the fact is that our growth in our economy we have to come from small and medium companies.
Right.
They have to be the real drivers of the economy. Big companies are actually going to be, it's less about the number of people you employ and the quality of the people you employ to drive the productivity. So we're going to have to grow our employment by growing the number of companies.
Thank you so much. I have been given the wrap-up signal. There's no time for me to do any closing comments other than to say I really want to thank our panelists. I think they've been animated, they've been incisive, and they have provided the experience that has come from their own activities plus their ability to watch closely their colleagues. I want to thank our audience, both our audience here at EJC and our virtual audience for the support and the questions. And the journey continues. You know, our panelists made the point, this crisis is not over. We are going to have to keep doing what we have been doing so far well, and we are going to have to be even more innovative if we are going to be the world-class players that many believe is Jamaica's destiny. Thank you so much, everyone. It has been a pleasure working with you, and all the best for the remainder of the evening.
The task is mine this evening to say thanks. We always classify this part of the program as a vote of thanks. And so I'd like to begin by thanking the ASI and the planning committee for putting together this program, and also JAMU ASI. We'd like to thank the president of East Jamaica Conference, Pastor Nathan, for hosting us this evening. I'd like to thank the panelists, Mr. Richard Pandui, Mr. Anthony Chang, Ms. Tavia Dunn, and Mr. Hugh Johnson. As a matter of fact, as we also have to thank Professor Wint, our moderator. As we think of the past or so, we think of some of the points that were raised. Anthony Chang said prayer is essential at a time like this. I couldn't agree with him more. Prayer and consultation are key elements in the human space. Mr. Richard Pandui, one of the points that he made was that it is important that we remember that the mission has to include our people. Tavia, consultation and communication. Christopher Williams, he spoke to us about redundancy. Redundancy to pivot during this pandemic. As we think of the various points that were raised, we realized that what sounded off as agreement among the panelists had to do with innovation, remaining humble. COVID will always have a marked effect on us, and it is really evolving. We are not yet over the crisis. The crisis is here, but we must remain aggressive and focused. As we listen to the panelists this evening, we recognize that their wealth of experience has helped their various organizations to stay relevant, afloat, successful, and innovative, to the point that they will be able, by God's grace, to continue in their own development as well as developing Jamaica. The social well-being of our people is very important to the future of any country. And so all the companies and institutions represented here this evening, together with those who will listen this evening, we recognize that we all have a part to play. And that part has to do with developing the entire person in Jamaica and the world. We know that aggression is important because although we recognized that there was not a reference to people like the late George Headley, we realized that they also had the focus, the Rowan Canais of the past and Sir Garfield Sobers also gave us something to live for. in the glorious days of West Indies cricket. And so we realize that we also have to rediscover the pathway to victory again for the West Indian team. This evening, we also would like to thank the producers led by Ella Castell and his team, Mrs. Adise Murphy. And so without further ado, I invite us to say a word of prayer. Kind Father, we thank you for being such a wonderful God, a God who gave us not only the capacity, but also the calmness, the delivery, the capabilities and the capacities to not only innovate, but also to recognize that you are our maker and our king. You are the one who made us, and you are the one who will always be there for us. And so we ask a blessing on all who participated this evening, on the various companies represented, ASI. We thank you, Lord, for the fact that we recognize that you are the one who gave us the capabilities and the brain power. And you ask us, because you have said to us, it is in you we live and move and have our being. May we always acknowledge this in whatever sphere we are in life, so that whatever we do will be down to thy name's honor and glory. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Cherubims fold their wings at the awe of their king. They bow before God's royal throne to worship him. As they lift their voice to give my God praise with just one word, that exalt him, glorify him, our God who's worthy of praise. They cry, holy, holy, holy to you, Lord. They cry, holy, holy, holy to you, Lord. Say, cherubims fold their wings at the awe of their king. They bow before God's royal throne to worship him. As they lift their voice to give my God praise with just one word, that exalt him, glorify him, our God who's worthy of praise. They cry, holy, holy, holy to you, Lord. 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 We stand before the King of Kings, holiness. We lift our voice and raise our hands to adore him. As we lift our voice to give my God praise with just one word, that exalt him, glorify him, our God who's worthy of praise. They cry, holy, holy, holy to you, Lord. Say we cry, holy, 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 holy to you, Lord. Say we cry, we cry, say we cry, Lord, so holy, holy to you, Lord. We cry, what an awesome God, what a mighty God. And Lord, we cry.